David and Goliath, and how David was an underdog. David was this young boy, he was a teenager, and he was called to be king over all of the nation of Israel. And then he went out and he saw that there's this huge giant of a man that was threatening his people, his friends, his family. And so he went out to go fight this guy. And when he went out, he didn't just, say, hey, I want to challenge you to a fight. He said, I'm going to knock you out and I'm going to cut off your head, super bold. And it's this young boy versus this guy who was 7 foot, super strong. He's fought in so many battles, won so many battles. And yet David was full of confidence. And so he wins and he cuts off his head. And we talked about being a giant slayer, a giant killer. That in our lives we have giants that are trying to hurt us, trying to kill us, getting in our way of doing something great for God, or being the underdog and coming out on top. And I said that we need to kill our giants. And then last week we talked about Esther and how Esther saved her people, her whole, the nation of the Jews, and there was a guy that wanted to kill them, and how she went to her husband because she was a queen and went to the king and said, my whole race is trying to be eliminated. Can you stop that? Because this guy is trying to do that. So her king husband, killed the guy that was trying to destroy the Jews, but that wasn't it. Esther needed to really finish the war is what I said. And that means that she had to go to her husband and say, you really signed this piece of paper that was going to eliminate my family. Can you go against that? And that's not something a king did. Once they wrote something down, to go against that, to bring that back and say, oh, I didn't mean it, that's embarrassing. That's not something a king did, but she had to finish a job. And I challenged us to fight our battles. And you're going to win some battles, you're going to lose some battles, but to win the war. So it means that sometimes you're going to get knocked back down, and there's a saying that says, we may have lost a battle, but not the war. And that's an encouragement, meaning that there's some times you're going to fall, there's some times you're going to struggle, but you got to get back up, you got to keep fighting and win that war. So then this week, we're talking about a guy big history buff, and there's a guy, his name is Louis Zamperini. And Louis, that's him right there, he was born in the early 1900s. And Louis, he found out in high school he could run really fast. And so he started training and running more and more, and eventually he made his way to the Olympics. And Louis, he went to the Olympics. He didn't win any medals, but he did end up setting a world record one of the races. And so after the Olympics, he decided to go to college. And then while he was in college, he wanted to go into the war, because this is around the 1940s once he was in college. And he wanted to, fight for America. And so he went into World War II, and, he was flying planes and stuff like that. So then, as he was flying a plane, he actually crashed. And it crashed into the ocean. And so there was about 11 people on board. 8 of them died, and there was 3 guys left, and Louis was one of them. And so they're stranded out on sea. And they're actually stranded at sea for 47 days. So, you're fighting for your country, you get stranded, and you're out on the water for 47 days. And what happened to him and these 3 guys, one of them ended up passing away just because of the sun and dehydration, but they would save rainwater, and that was how they lived and stayed hydrated. And sometimes it was only a few sips at a time, so that way they could stay alive. You can't drink ocean water because it's salt water. Because they're in World War II and they were close to the Japanese islands, there was Japanese fighters that were flying over them, shooting at them. I think it was 3 times that happened. No one got hit, no one died, but they had to jump into the water. And then there was a shark attack on them. Multiple times sharks tried to attack them, and they had to literally fight for their life for 47 days. And like I said, one of them passed away, so there's 2 of them left. So then after 47 days, they get to what is called the Marshall Islands, and these are really close to Japan. And so as soon as they get on land, they're taken as prisoners of war. So the Japanese take Louis and his buddy, and they're put in concentration camps at that time as prisoners of war. And they were tortured and beat every single day. I can't imagine fighting for your country. You go down in the water. You just survived shark attacks, Japanese fighter pilots. You survived dehydration, sunburn constantly being on top of you, only to go into a concentration camp and be abused and tortured. And Louis, there is a specific Japanese commander who sought him out personally. And the reason why is because he knew that he was an Olympic runner, and so he wanted to make his life as miserable as he could. So for 2 years, Louis was tormented more harshly than any other prisoner by this specific Japanese commander. And there's actually a movie, it's called Unbroken. Great movie, and I remember watching it, and there's a scene. Louis was actually transferred to 2 different concentration camps. And when he got to the last one, the third one, he thinks he's finally free of this commander that's been abusing him for the last year and a half. And so he gets there, and then he hears something, and he looks over, and he sees the commander, and he just breaks down and cries because he knows that possibly for the rest of his life, he's going to be tormented, abused, and tortured. So then the war ends, and he's able to come out of being a prisoner of war. He's no longer at these camps, and he's angry. He struggles with PTSD. He's been abused for the last 2 years or so. And he's struggling with hatred, and he dreams about killing his captors every single night. But then something happens. His wife goes to a Billy Graham, what they call a crusade. Billy Graham was a great evangelist. I was actually studying up on him today. What he would do is he would go around the world and preach the gospel. And it says that he actually reached 2.2 billion people, which is insane. But anyway, so his wife went to one of Billy Graham's crusades or conferences and heard Billy Graham speak and accepted Christ. And then she brought her husband the next night. Louis didn't want to go, but as soon as he got there, he felt so loved and so accepted by Christ. So he gave his life to Christ that night, and then he ended up forgiving his captors, the people that tormented, abused him, and tortured him for 2 years. And when we talk about underdogs, Louis' story is great. I mean, you have the whole, he went through the shipwreck, he was stranded on sea for 47 days, went through torture, and then was free. But the true freedom, I believe, the true victory, was accepting Christ and being able to forgive the people that hurt him the most. Because he was still not free, even though he wasn't a captor anymore. He was still bound by hatred and anger. And sometimes it's more than just the physical that we need freedom from. And so tonight, we're going to be talking about a guy named Joseph. And I'm going to tell the story kind of like I did last week, but there's a middle part. And that's going to be my main focus. I'm going to talk about it more so at the end. But you have this kid named Joseph, and I say kid because he's about 17, so older teenager. And one day he has a dream. And in this dream, he says that he's like in the middle of a crowd. There's about 10 plants around him. And in this dream, these plants are bowing down to him. And so he wakes up, and he has 10 brothers. So he goes and tells his 10 brothers, like, hey, I had this really cool dream. And his brothers already didn't like him because they thought he was the favorite. Now, we asked that question before, like, put yourself in order with your siblings. So how many of you guys have siblings in here? Raise your hand. How many of you guys know who the favorite sibling is? Raise your hand. So for those of you who don't have your hand up, you probably are the favorite, and thus your siblings don't like you. But, so some of you guys know how it feels to have that favorite sibling, the one that the parents maybe treat a little bit nicer. They don't have to do as many chores. And that was kind of Joseph. Joseph didn't have to do as many chores. He actually got like this handmade coat given to him from his dad, and the brothers didn't get anything. And he didn't have to go out and, plant all this stuff and take in all the food. He could just do whatever he wanted. So his brothers, once they heard this dream, they were not happy. They were angry with him. Like, what do you mean we're going to be bowing down? Like, we're the plants that are bowing down to you? That's stupid. Then next night he has another dream, and again he's in the middle of a circle, and in the circle there's a sun and a moon and stars. 10 stars and one sun and one moon. And so he wakes up and he tells his dad, and his dad is like, what do you mean there's a sun and a moon bowing down to you? Are you saying that your mother and I were going to be bowing down to you and your brothers? So his dad got mad at that point, and Joseph didn't think he did anything wrong. He's just telling this dream that he got from God. Well, fast forward a little bit, his brothers take him outside, and they're doing their work or whatever, and then they start plotting. Start saying, I don't really like our brother, let's kill him. And all the other ones are like, yeah, let's kill him. He sucks, I hate him. So They take him out and they plan to throw him in what's called a pit, basically this huge hole in the ground that people dig out for animals. And they want him dead with that. So they decide to leave him in there, but then they're like, we could actually make some money. So what they do is they take him out and they sell him to another land. And so, I can't imagine being Joseph at this point. He loves his brothers, and he hears them talking about how much they hate him, they want him to die. And then they end up selling him to another land. And what they do after they sell him, they keep the money, and they grab that coat that his dad made for him, and they put some blood on it and bring it to their father and say, you know what, your son, he's died. He got killed by an animal. I'm sorry he's no longer here. And the dad cries because he just lost his son. So the brothers, all 10 of them think that they're fine. They're without their brother. They can go about their lives. Exactly. So Joseph, he ends up being, sold as a slave to these people in a different country. And then as time goes on, he starts gaining some respect, and he's a hard worker and a really likable guy. And he actually becomes second to the king. He rises through the ranks, and the king loves him. He's like, hey, you're second in command. Anything you want to say, you get to say. Anything you want done will be done. Joseph was like, you know what? This is awesome. This is the underdog story. He was sold into slavery. His brothers wanted him dead. And then, he's second in command to the king. That's crazy. So then one day, the Bible says that Joseph is a really good-looking guy. And the queen, the king's wife, looked at him and was like, man, I have this fat, ugly king, but I could have this nice-looking guy right here. So she throws herself on him like, hey, you should come with me. This could be fun. And he's like, I can't do that because I serve God. This would be against God. And, my boss is your husband. That would be wrong. So she gets mad. So she grabs onto him and she rips off his clothes, and he just runs out with no clothes on. And then she starts thinking, I've been rejected. So she cries out, and the king's people come to her and what happened? And she sees he has some clothes in her hand, and she said, this guy Joseph, he tried to take advantage of me, and I screamed out, and he just ran out without any clothes on. So the king, he comes in, he gets mad as any husband would, and throws Joseph in jail. And so Joseph, after already being thrown into this pit where his brothers wanted him to die, then they sold him off to someone else, didn't know if he was going to live or die. He rises up through the ranks, and then only to do what is right and be thrown in jail. And I can't imagine being Joseph thinking, I did everything. So Joseph, he's in jail, and it says that Joseph was there for quite a while. Didn't really do anything wrong, and I was a stand-up guy. So then there was 2 other guys that were in jail. And one night they both had some weird dreams, and Joseph, was there, and he heard them talking about the dreams. So he goes over to him and says, hey, tell me your dreams. And so they tell him. And he interprets the one dream, saying its meaning. And, he says, hey, you're going to get out of jail tomorrow. The king is going to call on you, and you're going to be restored. Everything you've once had, your family, your job, it's all going to be given back to you. So the other guy hears that. He's like, oh, man, that was a good interpretation. Mine's going to be good too. So Joseph, tells him his interpretation. It says, hey, you're going to get out of jail tomorrow as well, but you're going to die. Lo and behold, next day, the one guy gets out, is free to go. The other guy dies. So Joseph, before the guy left, the one that was going to live, he said, hey, don't forget me. I'm a good guy. I didn't do anything wrong. Go tell the king, hey, I'm innocent. The guy doesn't do that. 2 years pass of Joseph sitting in jail for a crime he didn't commit. And finally, the king at that time, the old king passed away, new king is there. King has a dream, and then the one guy remembers, oh, Joseph, he told me my dream. Let me go tell the king about Joseph. Joseph comes out of jail, and the king talks to him hey, this is my dream. And what the dream was, Joseph interpreted. Basically, there's going to be 7 years of a good harvest. And what that means is that this land is going to be able to grow fruit and food and all this other stuff really well for the next 7 years. But then after that, there's going to be 7 years where you're not going to be able to grow anything. There's going to be no rain, and nothing is going to be able to be grown. So what you need to do is you need to save a percentage of your food for the next 7 years, and that'll provide for the 7 years where you won't have food. So the king is like, oh man, that's a good idea. You're super smart. Here, you get to be the next in command. And so Joseph, once again, rises up second in command. And then lo and behold, 7 years, a lot of food is able to be grown. And then now they're in that 7 years where food isn't able to be grown. And then his brothers realize that they need food. They're in this time where they can't eat. There's nothing for them to grow. And so they have to go to Egypt where Joseph is at. And long story short is they go and see Joseph. They don't recognize him, but Joseph recognizes his brothers, and he puts them through some tests, kind of a little bit of payback. And then they have this super cool family reunion. And, he lets them know who he is. He forgives them. They, hug and cry. And then they invite the dad. And dad's like, whoa, I thought you died. Nope, surprise, I didn't. Your sons tried to kill me. So they have this super cool family reunion. And that's kind of the end of the story. It's that underdog story. He survived death twice and rose to the ranks. But the part I want to focus on is the prison. And I think that when I think about an underdog, I think that we can we skip past the part where sometimes the underdog goes through a lot of losing. The underdog goes through a lot of beatdowns. They go through a lot of trials. And as a Christian, as someone that believes in God, you're going to go through the dark place. I can't imagine being Joseph in this jail. There's no light. You are in constant darkness. It's cold. You don't get a blanket. You don't get a bed. You're literally laying on the floor. There's bugs everywhere. There's snakes. There's rats. That was his home for 2 years. He didn't get food, and normally the king's prisoners, especially someone like Joseph who was accused of raping his wife or trying to rape his wife, would have gotten beaten every single day. And he had to endure that for 2 years before God restored him. And I can imagine being Joseph saying, you know what, God, I had these dreams that I was going to be elevated, that people were going to bow down to me, and I haven't done anything wrong. Why are you not here? Why have you forsaken me? Why am I doing all the right things but yet getting punished as if I did something wrong? And sometimes that's what being a Christian is. That even when we do everything right, we can check every box. We can be the person that loves Jesus all our heart, but we still have to go through the darkness. And as I was reading this, all of Genesis, for where Joseph was at, there was one part that really stood up. And it was Genesis 39:21, and it says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." And I want to focus on the first part of that. It says, "But the Lord was with Joseph." And I think that when we're going through this darkness, when we're going through these trials where we feel like life sucks, I'm going through depression, you know what, I'm struggling with addiction, my parents are going through a divorce, I get bullied at school, I'm going through this breakup. We ask, where is God? I don't feel any peace. But here, in the midst of the worst pain of Joseph's life, for doing nothing wrong, it says the Lord was with him. And that's a promise. That is a comfort. And it says on top of that, that he showed him steadfast love. And I think of some of the darkest times of my life. I've been a Christian, going on 20 years or so. And I've been through a lot. I've been through a lot of pain. I've been through a lot of heartache. And I've been in some dark times. Sometimes I put myself in that darkness because I, mess up. I struggle. I do things I know I shouldn't. But other times, the darkness just comes. And there are times where I am in that prison. There are times where I'm in that dungeon. And it feels so dark, guys. It feels so empty. It feels so painful. And I can't imagine going through that for 2 years. And I think some of you guys in here are in the same place I'm at, where maybe currently right now you're in a dungeon. I'm going to let you know that, I've been fighting something for 2 weeks now. Probably the worst pain I've ever been in. The most impossible thing I ever thought I would have to go through is what I'm going through. And so when Joseph, he's in this prison and says, but God is with him, I question that. Is God him go through that? Because I look at my life and I say, God, where are you? Where is your steadfast love? And there are times within the last 2 weeks I've had to literally fall on the floor begging God for some peace. I was in here Monday at 6 a.m. I come into work early, and I came into sanctuary, and I just cried right here, screaming out to God because I was in so much pain, so much heartache. And as I call the worship team up, I want you guys to be honest with where you're at. And so tonight, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I asked the worship team to add one more song, one more soul song. And I'm going to do something I've done a few times. I'm going to open up right up front here. Because I feel like I'm not the only one who feels like they're in darkness. That feels like God isn't there, and you can sense all the evilness around you. You know how there are snakes and rats around Joseph. Well, there's snakes and rats, metaphorically too, where in life you feel like you're being attacked, where in life you feel like you're being bitten by something, where in life you feel like everything is against you. And so tonight, if I'm not the only one, then I want you guys to come up here. If that's you, if you're in the same place I am, then let's fight this together. Because I'm going to be up here. I'm going to be praying. I'm going to be crying. I'm going to be begging God for that steadfast love that he gave Joseph. And like I said, maybe some of you are in that same spot. I encourage you to come up here. Meet God face to face. Yell at God if you have to. Ask questions. Demand an answer. God always comes through. And let's say that you're not in that spot, but you be honest, sometimes just a loving touch from a friend can give so much healing. There's so many people that have reached out to me that have given me hugs within the last 2 weeks and just let me cry with them, and it's been so impactful. You have no idea how much a hug can save someone that is going through a dark time. So as we go into worship, if that is you, if you're in that place, if you're in that prison, don't be embarrassed about the what ifs of who's going to see you. This is your opportunity to get some light. This is your opportunity to get out of the dungeon, to get some freedom.
You call me out upon the water, the great unknown. Our feet may fail, and there I find you in the mystery, an ocean